So today we are diving into a book that's, well, it's a little bit of everything. It's part self-help, part history lesson, and part Machiavellian playbook. We're talking about Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power, and we're really going to get into the big question it raises. Is this book a manual for how the world should be, or is it just holding up a mirror to how it already is?
Okay, let's just jump right in, because you're hit with this wild paradox from the get-go. On one hand, you've got a massive bestseller. We're talking over 1.2 million copies sold in the US alone. It's been embraced by CEOs, celebrities, you name it. But on the other hand, it's one of the most forbidden books out there, literally banned by name in multiple US prison systems.
And that really gets to the heart of it, right? How can one book be both? How can it be an essential guide for some people and considered dangerous contraband for others? What is actually in this book that makes it so popular and at the same time so feared?
To get to the bottom of it, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at how this book became such a huge deal. Then, we'll decode some of its most famous and infamous laws. After that, we'll tackle the serious ethical criticisms against it, explore the author's defense, and finally, talk about what this all means for your relationship with power.
So let's start at the very beginning. What even is the 48 Laws of Power? Where did it come from? Turns out its rise to fame is almost as strategic as the laws it teaches.
The book was published way back in 1998 by Robert Greene. Now, Greene was working as a writer in Hollywood, and he started noticing something, that the power players in modern-day LA acted a whole lot like the powerful figures he'd read about in history books. So he decided to connect the dots. He sifted through 3,000 years of history. We're talking everyone from Caesar to Sun Tzu, and boiled it all down into 48 laws. And it came out at the perfect time, right at the peak of the dot-com boom when business was cutthroat. The goal wasn't just to tell cool stories from the past, but to give people a raw, unfiltered guide to the power games that are playing out all around us every single day.
All right, let's get into the core of the book. To really understand why it hits such a nerve, we have to look at some of the laws themselves. And trust me, they are unflinching.
We'll start with law number 1, which is kind of the foundation for the whole thing. It's not about playing dumb, it's about being smart with your smarts. The law says that power isn't always logical. It's driven by emotion. And the most dangerous emotion you can spark in your boss is insecurity. So, in the real world, this could mean letting your superior take the credit for your great idea, or carefully framing your achievements so they feel like they guided you to them. The goal is to make them see you as a valuable asset, not as a threat who's coming for their job.
And this story just illustrates it perfectly. So back in the 17th century, the French finance minister, a guy named Nicolas Fouquet, decides to throw this absolutely epic party for his king, Louis XIV. I mean, the chateau was breathtaking, the food was incredible, it was the party of the century. But here's the problem. It was too good. It was so lavish, so impressive, that it made the king feel small, insecure. A few weeks later, Fouquet was arrested on bogus charges and he spent the rest of his life in prison. Think about that. His real crime wasn't treason. It was just outshining the master.
Okay, next up is Law 5, which basically says your reputation is everything. Guard it with your life. Greene's point is that your reputation walks into the room before you do. It does half the work for you. If you have a reputation for being honest, people will trust you. If you have a reputation for being ruthless, people will think twice before crossing you. You have to actively build and protect that perception because one dumb mistake, one slip-up, can demolish years of hard work.
And now we get to a law like this one, number 15, which is where the controversy really heats up. The logic here is brutal, but it's simple. If you leave an enemy with anything, a little bit of hope, a few resources, they're not defeated. They're just a future problem waiting to happen. They will regroup, they will wait, and they will come back for revenge. The law says that in a real power struggle, being merciful is a massive, even fatal mistake. And yeah, it's this kind of cold, hard advice that makes people so uncomfortable.
And that uncomfortableness, it's real. The laws we just covered are a big reason why a lot of critics see this book as nothing more than a handbook for sociopaths. So let's really dig into the arguments against Greene's work. Maybe the most powerful criticism comes from the most surprising person, Robert Greene himself. He actually said in an interview that anyone who followed all 48 of his laws to the letter would be a horrible, ugly person. So the guy who wrote the playbook is literally warning you not to follow it blindly. He's admitting that if you take it as a strict how-to guide, you're on a path to becoming a paranoid, isolated monster.
And beyond that, academics have some serious issues with it. Stanford professor Jeffrey Pfeffer, for one, says the book's whole method is just not scientific. Greene essentially cherry-picks historical stories that perfectly fit his laws and conveniently ignores all the examples that might contradict them. It makes for great storytelling, sure, but it's not solid research. Critics say this encourages manipulation, creates toxic relationships built on distrust, and rips historical events out of their context, making them seem like universal truths when they're really not.
And look, this isn't just some intellectual debate in an ivory tower. Some authorities see these ideas as genuinely dangerous. In states like Utah, the 48 Laws of Power is specifically banned in prisons. Why? Because the people in charge believe its lessons could be weaponized, that inmates could use these tactics to manipulate guards, exploit each other, and disrupt the entire system. They don't see it as self-help. They see it as a threat. But if the book is that toxic, why do millions of people keep buying it? Is it really just a manual for being a terrible person? Or is there another way to look at this whole thing? Well, this gets us to the author's side of the story. Greene's defense is actually pretty simple, but it's deep. He says, look, I'm not telling you how you should act. I'm just showing you how the world already works. He argues that all this stuff, the desire for power, the jealousy, the manipulation, it's already inside all of us. It's our shadow self. We can pretend it's not there, but we can't escape our own human nature. So from his point of view, the book isn't creating monsters. It's just holding up a mirror to the monster that's already there. And that idea completely reframes the whole debate. So, is the book prescriptive, a manual telling you what to do, or is it descriptive, a field guide showing you what's being done? From this angle, learning the laws isn't about using them on other people. It's about recognizing when they're being used on you. It's a tool for self-defense, a way to arm yourself with knowledge so you won't be a victim of these power plays.
It's also super important to realize Greene didn't just invent these ideas out of thin air. He's standing on the shoulders of some of history's most realist thinkers. That whole crush your enemy totally idea, that's pure Machiavelli. Conceal your intentions, that's a core concept from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And the push to enter action with boldness, that connects right back to Nietzsche and his whole idea of the will to power.
So after looking at the laws, the intense criticism, and the author's defense, what are we supposed to do with all this? How do you actually use a book that's so brilliant and, at the same time, so potentially dangerous? Well, the biggest takeaway seems to be this. Power itself is just a tool. It's amoral. That means it isn't inherently good or evil. It's like fire. You can use it to cook a meal and warm your family, or you can use it to burn a house down. The fire doesn't care. The book argues that instead of judging power, we should just recognize it as a force that's always at play in the world, and it's either being used effectively or ineffectively.
And that leaves you, the reader, with a really clear choice. You're at a fork in the road. You can take path number 1 and use these laws offensively, as a weapon to manipulate people and get what you want. Or you can take path number 2 and use them defensively, as a shield. You can learn them to spot when someone's trying to play games with you, to protect yourself, and to just navigate the world with your eyes wide open. You might even use that knowledge to call out toxic behavior and build better, more honest environments. In the end, the 48 Laws of Power doesn't give you any easy answers. What it does is force you to ask yourself a tough question. It basically says that, like it or not, we are all in this giant game of power, every single day. We don't get to choose if we play. The only choice we have is how we play. So who are you going to be? A pawn who gets pushed around? A strategic player? Or maybe, just maybe, someone who tries to change the rules of the game itself? That's the question it leaves you with.